Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you taking the time today. So my name is Barrett Ayers. I'm the president of Adhesion Wealth. Thank you very much for joining us today. Just as a quick commercial, Adhesion Wealth, we are a managed account platform for independent investment advisors. So the topic today is near and dear to my heart. Today, as part of our Supercharged with Adhesion series, we're joined by Matt Song of PFI Advisors. Matt is the CEO and founder of PFI Advisors, and PFI educates advisors on building more impactful and profitable enterprises. We've worked with Matt for some time now. Really great to work with him. We're super excited to be joined by him today. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's a great topic. In fact, so the topic today is called "Start with the End in Mind," and it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but really it is kind of a visual for how you may wish to think about your practice if you're an advisor, whether that's just starting off as an independent advisor or contemplating the move to going independent, or even thinking about what that next phase of growth means to you. We want to talk a little bit about, the where, the when, the how you want the journey to end as you make your first series of moves. Sometimes that first series of moves can be the most daunting. And as Matt can certainly attest through all the advisors he's worked with, there can be a bit of chaos that ensues as you first go independent. And some of those decisions you make on day one can sometimes be difficult to unwind down the road, right? We work with many advisors that way. So Matt, I know we've worked together for some time, and you work with a lot of advisors who are on the start of their journey, right? They picked the door that means going independent. So, and some of them are thinking about going to break away, and some of them are in the process of going independent. What are some tips that you share with advisors who are contemplating this journey?
So when I'm talking to advisors that are transitioning from the wirehouse or the IBD side of the business over to the RIA space, I usually recommend that they think of it in two phases. The first phase, they simply want to focus on the existing clients and getting them to move to the new firm. And that messaging is very much centered around everything here is exactly the same, but it's better. So you want to tell clients, your fees are going to stay the same. The entire team has come with me, so you're going to be serviced in the exact same manner you were before. But you also want to explain to them how the new firm will offer the client more investment opportunities or access to different investment vehicles. There's no more, tell them there's no more pressure to be selling certain products. I can finally be a true fiduciary for you, Mr. or Mrs. Client. And the metric for success during that first phase is really entirely determined by what percentage of the existing clients that you wanted to come with you ultimately signed on the dotted line and transitioned. And then in the second phase, let's say 3 to 6 months after you've launched the firm, the advisors will take a quick breath, that the transition of existing clients is done, and then they enter phase two. And in this phase, it's all about the net new assets and the excitement that comes from finally being able to market the business exactly as they always have wanted to. But for compliance reasons or bureaucratic reasons at the old firm, they never could market the way they really wanted to. So the metric for success in the second phase is all about signing up new clients to the RIA, and this should be the most exciting time for those advisors and staff at that newly launched RIA.
So would you say then in that first phase, and I kind of referenced chaos on the way to independence, so is it really about mitigating anxiety and making sure that there's kind of a known solution there for advisors who are coming with you, for clients that are coming with you, and just ease the anxiety out of the gate?
Yep, we had written an article not too long ago titled "Perfection is the Enemy of a Smooth Transition." There's going to be some chaos. There's a few things are not going to go right. The copier is going to break when you're printing out the deck for your largest client, whatever. So there is a little bit of chaos, as you said, but ultimately, again, that kind of 3 to 6 month time frame, all the clients that you wanted are going to come with you, as long as you have that compelling message for the clients. And I feel like every advisor, I'm sure you've heard it too, everyone says I should have done it sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that. I was going to mention that too. The first few months is really tough, and I think setting expectations, your own internal emotional expectations with your staff, with your clients, I think that's important. But to date, and we've been in this business for, for 16 years now, and I don't think I've heard one single independent advisor who's gone independent, broken away, in retrospect, wish they had stayed captive. I
Right.
have yet to hear that. So it's a little work out of the gate, but once you're there, it's well worth it. So what about when you think about those firms that are maybe doing it a little bit different, whether they're merging with a firm or acquiring a business of their own? Do you think they have to think about things a little bit differently than those that are fully breaking away independently on day one?
Well, with mergers, let me hedge my answer here by saying I'm an ops guy. I'm not a deal guy, so I don't get involved in the deal structure or the valuation discussions. But in terms of integrating after the merger is complete, obviously success is measured in how many clients joined the new firm, right? The economics of these deals are predicated on the majority, if not all, of the assets coming to the new combined, merged firm. So the seller, sort of similar to what I said before about the breakaway advisor, the seller here had better have a compelling story beyond just, hey, I took a big check to come here. So the story has to be around the new firm will service that client better. Hopefully they can talk about access to investments and services that the seller didn't have access to prior to the merger. Now that they're part of a larger firm, hopefully that's opened up the gates for different products and services. And hopefully they can talk about improved technology that will be available to the clients to monitor their portfolios, and perhaps new technology is going to be in the hands of the employees as well, and that's going to help them service the clients more efficiently. But another metric beyond just the AUM coming over is I think it's an important one, and that's process improvements for both the buyer and the seller once the merger is complete. Instead of the buyer simply saying, hey, you're going to do things my way when this merger is complete, we're seeing a lot of buyers take this opportunity to review how they do things versus how the seller's conducting their business, and then try to cherry pick the best strategy moving forward. So maybe the seller has a unique financial planning process that the buyer can adopt, whereas maybe the performance reporting process of the buyer is what the new firm's gonna adopt, or maybe the seller has a more efficient process around billing, and that's going to get everyone paid much faster every quarter. So beyond just the AUM levels, we're seeing buyers and sellers basing the success of their mergers on the process improvements and the ease of doing business post-merger.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes, and maybe this is a testament to, the work that the consulting firms have done, but some of the smaller firms, to your point, really have achieved a rapid growth, which makes them really good acquisition targets, right? So some of the things that the smaller firms are doing and have embraced, which made them attractive in the first place, are actually pretty good processes, right?
Correct.
Just because you're small doesn't mean that it's an immature or somehow ineffective process, and it needs to be examined as possibly the thing that wins out. So completely understand. In fact, that's something that we talk to firms, and obviously we don't go into nearly the depth of consulting work that you do, which is why we partner with you. But we do talk to advisors in similar phases of growth. We talk about, the initial phase about going independent. Then we talk about achieving rapid and stabilized growth, right?
Yeah.
Which I think you described as kind of stage number 2. Then we talk about the step of achieving scale, right? We believe you got to grow first, and then you achieve scale. And then finally thinking about, with the end in mind, the transition, whether that's, the exit, whether it's an exit of some sort, an acquisition, a merge, a recapitalization event, or just a retire. So thinking about each one of those phases and what it means to you, each phase obviously has its own unique challenges, but we think advisors need to kind of understand the end objective to help guide you through to make the right series of decisions early on. I mean, in the first phase, we think about, going independent, and it's all about, to your point, about stabilization, minimizing fallout from the transition. In the second phase, rapid growth, finding the right partners, testing, to your point earlier, testing that growth story in the market. You went independent for a reason. Let's test that independent idea against the market to make sure you had it. But during this phase, though, continuous refinement and tweaking of the offering and the story while optimizing the process is really important here. Again, I'll emphasize, because we think finding great partners in this phase that really help support advisors' growth of the business so they can step out to do what they need to do better. In the third phase, about achieving scale, we think about, once you've hit that phase, it should be about investing excess working capital into the areas of the business that focus on your core competencies. Now that you've outsourced, where are you investing your each incremental dollar to make it worth 2 to 3 to 5x more than it was before? That's the definition of scale. And how do you do it in such a way that it advances you towards your strategic objectives? And then obviously with the end in mind, thinking about, how do you identify your exit, whatever that exit may be. So speaking with the end in mind, and all along the way, we encourage advisors to keep an eye on margins, right? Margins are key. What does EBITDA look like? So how do you talk about margin erosion with advisors? And I know years ago you and I were talking about the fear of a race towards zero. Has that materialized, and where do we stand, and how do you talk about that?
Yeah, like you said, a few years ago, everyone was worried about fee compression caused by, robo advisors, ETFs. Hey, they've commoditized the investment management side of our business. Fees are all gonna go to zero, like you said. And I think our industry did a great job of reframing our value proposition, and we've added more services to the offering. I know Cerule's latest RIA marketplace report talked about this too. They said advisors are searching for ways to ensure that they're meeting the needs of their existing and prospective clients. And so so the fee level has stayed stable. We're saying, hey, you're not really paying me for the investment management anymore, but I'm doing all these other things. We've brought in a bunch of CPAs. We're doing your tax returns for you now. We've brought in clerical folks, and they're doing your bill pay for you, whatever it may be. So these expanded services have meant they had to add staff, they had to add technology, they had to add relationships with third-party providers. And so the fees have stayed stable. We were afraid they were going to drop, but our expense levels have gone up. So there absolutely is fee compression. Margin compression. Fees have stayed stable, but margins have been compressed. And so I think RIA owners need to be aware of that. I think everyone that grew up in the wirehouse world, you've been trained to only think of top line revenue. You say, hey, top line revenue is going up. We're getting more and more clients because we're adding these extra services. But you've got to keep an eye on margins and the compression that's going on there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I totally remember. I think everybody who's in the advisory space now, just a few years ago, thinking about the robos, right, and having us all scared to death that we're going to be automated or fully disintermediated from the relationship. But it turns out, rather than fearing that race to zero, like you said, what's really happening is you're just being asked to do more for less, and in an effort to kind of justify your fee. So really, in my mind, what that means then is what we're talking about is getting really good at resource optimization and allocation and prioritization of your resources. So, you focus on what you do best, you outsource the rest. And, frankly, outsourcing is the solution for doing more with less. And it is an obvious, in my opinion, it's an obvious evolution that, frankly, if you look around, nearly all industries that we know have gone through this exercise and this transition to move towards specialization as a method to achieve rapid growth. So we see it all the time, and obviously it's our business, full disclosure, but we don't think advisors should be scared to outsource. It's not a four-letter word. We published a study last year with some really interesting findings, and I'll pull up. So, and by the way, we've got a great paper that talks about kind of a before and after snapshot from last year of advisors who chose this path of outsourcing, what it meant to their business. Just specifically, a couple real interesting highlights. 61% of advisors who outsourced in this study, their investment management function reported revenue growth of 10% or more, which is 30% higher than the industry average benchmark. 58% of them indicated a decline in overall operating costs. 18% actually reported a 10% reduction of cost or more. 72% of advisors who outsourced reported annual AUM growth of 10% or more since they decided to outsource investment management, which puts them above the 6% to 9% measured by industry benchmarks. More than 2/3 of advisors reported that the primary benefit to their decision to outsource has meant more time on services, which we just talked about, client relationships and business development. So you don't spend as much time on investment management. That's where your time goes. That's key to growing and scaling. And finally, clients also benefited in the performance arena, which is interesting. More than 1/3 of advisors cite better overall investment performance as a primary benefit to outsourcing. So the point is, if you pick the right partner, you can maintain, the margins, you can improve the client deliverable, and it does work. So anyway, speaking of stats, so talk a little, Matt, if you don't mind, can you just talk a little bit more about kind of benchmarking and maybe your perspectives on best practices in outsourcing?
So I'm the rare consultant that doesn't hang my hat on benchmarking data, and I get myself in trouble for it quite often. But right or wrong, I learned this RIA industry. I was working at a firm. We launched out of the wirehouses with $1.7 billion. We had 17 employees, and in 4.5 years, we tripled AUM. We got to $6 billion of AUM, but we only doubled our headcount to 34 employees. And during that time, I could never find a benchmarking study that was showing the growth that we were experiencing, or that was showing the very few number of employees that we had. So I just I just never learned to appreciate the benchmarking study. So I mean, now today as a consultant, I'll see firms. There's a $1 billion firm that may have 20 employees, and then there's a $1 billion firm across the street that has 60 employees. Or there's a $500 million firm that has 7 employees, and another $500 million firm has 20 employees. It really depends on the complexity of the client relationships and the services that you're offering to those clients. In my mind, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no magical ratio to say exactly when to hire your next employee. Each firm needs to sit back and really ask what's right for our business, what's right for our clients, and ultimately what's right for our employees too. I like to think, instead of a numerical metric of when should we hire, it's more qualitative. You walk around the office, and if people are bloodshot eyes and they're drinking 19 cups of coffee, and they're coming in on Saturdays, hey, and hopefully you're getting ahead of it and you're not getting to that point before it dawns on you. But I look at more qualitative metrics than these quantitative metrics that everybody always asks me for.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, well, look, this has been, it's a great way to wrap this up too, by the way. I mean, you talk a little bit about, the end in mind. What you're describing really is, as an advisory firm going independent, think about the end and where you want to be, because it's difficult to issue benchmarking metrics when you have no idea what type of end practice you want to be. So think about who that is. Is it a resource intensive business, a technology intensive business? Think about what that looks like, what the end result looks like, and then march towards that particular direction. But having a series of benchmarks and mile marker posts along the way doesn't make as much sense, because you need to know exactly the type of practice you want to be. So look, Matt, as always, this is a fantastic time. I love talking to you about your outlook and perspective on the markets. Advisors going independent is something we talk about all the time. We hear from advisors all the time. And I hope we shed some light to our viewers today. Again, if anybody would like a copy of the Adhesion outsourcing investment study, please feel free to reach out to our sales team at sales@adhesionwealth.com. Obviously, Matt, feel free to reach out to Matt. And if you need help going independent or making some decisions about the right path, there's nobody better than Matt at that particular topic. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Matt, thanks again for joining us today, and had a really good time. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.